You know what this is, Landis? This is a two-sword Saturday. It's a two-sword Saturday.
Don't get a penalty for brandishing a weapon.
I know. I would like that to become the thing when Northern guys celebrate. Instead of shooting a gun, they draw a sword and they stab. We will pay for those fines if they get fined for sword stabbing. It's a two-sword Saturday on KOTN Late Night because Bama can cram it. But listen, I know there's a lot of people. So there's some great Northern wins today. This weekend. Syracuse won this weekend. That was huge. Oregon beat Michigan State. Pitt, huge win today. Iowa State, huge win today. West Virginia, huge win today. Washington over Michigan just now. Minnesota over USC just now. Huge. Penn State stayed undefeated. Indiana stayed undefeated. Wisconsin bounced back against Purdue. Nebraska beat Rutgers in a defensive slugfest. So Landis, I know we got to give the people what they want, and frankly, what I want, which is to tell Bama to cram it. And not just Bama, but national college football ding-dongs that we called out this week. If you extrapolated from one Georgia-Alabama game that they were the two best teams in the country, you were stupid then and you're stupider now. But I want to tell people to cram it with a reason, Landis, right? Doesn't this actually super duper matters? Yes?
Yes, it certainly matters that the dominant two powers in the sport over the last decade look incredibly vulnerable. I would say that super duper matters. Yes.
So I'm going to put my swords away and we're going to talk about ball, but also Bama can cram it. I outlined the KOTN Southern College Football Viewing Guide on Twitter earlier today, and I did not run it past you before I put it out there. So I want to double check with you now if this is appropriate. This is how we view Southern football. Number one, if you are a loyal member of the KOTN Northern football family, the number one thing that you root for in regards to Southern football is anything that shatters the myth of Southern superiority and the narrative of Southern superiority. Do you agree with that? That's what the North should hope for?
Yes, that is chief among. Well, I guess you put that ahead of. I guess they kind of go hand in hand, right? Rooting for the North, but.
Well, so this is the Southern viewing guide. The Northern viewing guide is separate. Yeah.
So okay, then yes,
that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
It's narratives. We're shattering narratives. Number two is rooting against anything that the SEC biased national media wants and supports. So that's often the same thing, but it's a little more particular, right? Because we want SEC biased national media and biased Southern media to cram it and realize that they are wrong when they open their mouths. That's also important. That's number two. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Number three is root against Georgia. Number four is root against Bama, which is why we rooted for Bama last week against Georgia, because Georgia's higher on the root against pecking order. And then number five is just general Southern chaos. Are you okay with that 1 through 5?
I am very much okay with that 1 through 5. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad we agree on that. Here's why it matters. Because what is happening, and by the way, if you are from the South and somebody on Twitter came at me from the South and wanted to use the past is the past. And I will tell you, sometimes people in the South have a habit of trying to hang on to the past. We are not living in the past in college football. We are living in the new world. We are living in a 12-team playoff world. We are living in an NIL world. We are living in a portal world. And in that world, the North is on equal footing with the South. And that's the point we are trying to make here, Landis. Do you agree with that? And if somebody from the South tries to tell you, well, yeah, by the way, the Southern King retired. That also matters there. NIL, portal, 12-team playoff, the Southern King retired. Those are 4 reasons the past doesn't matter. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And not only did the Southern King retire, but the presumed heir to the throne lost last week and then was crying to his fan base to be more into his team this week. So
I could go right there right now. Do you want me to go right to Georgia? Are we skipping over Bama losing to Vanderbilt to bring out the fact that the dogs are turning on each other? Dog mentality has turned into dogging your own fans mentality. You sent me the clip. Please explain it to the people who maybe the people who were overwhelmed by the joy of Vanderbilt, honorary Northern member. If I could have ordered a Vanderbilt banner that could have arrived in 15 minutes, maybe one day there'll be an Amazon drone that can deliver stuff in 15 minutes. There'd be a Vanderbilt banner back there. Instead, we have all the Northern winners this week. Explain the Kirby Smart thing you're talking about.
Yeah, so Kirby Smart, after Georgia beat Auburn 31-13 today in Athens, I don't even know what he was doing. It must have been like a TV hit or something. He was like sitting alone, or not alone. He was sitting in a room with like one other reporter. And he said to that reporter something along the lines of like, I was disappointed in our atmosphere today. We count on the fans to be behind this team. We count on a certain kind of home field advantage. And he didn't feel like they had that. He really needs the fans to get behind the upstart Georgia Bulldogs so that they can have enough fighting spirit to, to beat the Auburns of the world.
One loss. And Kirby's at It's the Fans' Fault. One loss. It took one loss. One loss. He's 1-6 against Alabama. He's turning on the fans. If you are a Georgia fan who is turned off by your head coach blaming you, you're welcome here. Come join us. So that's a little bit of a sidelight. Here's what matters, Landis. This is what honestly really matters. The point is not that the South stinks. That's not the point. The point is that I feel like forever, Bill, and I think the viewers and the listeners right now of KOTN, the people who love Northern football, have been following Northern football. The North gets dinged. If you lose in the North, if you play a close game against an underdog in the North, you get dinged. It is a black mark against you. Mm-hmm. And it has not felt like that has happened to Southern teams in the same situation. But every time it happens now in this modern era, all these dings, we just want people to realize the South is dented. It is not pristine. It is not a brand new car. It is not, we're not even saying that it's worse than the North. We're just saying nobody's perfect. And we're trying to bust this narrative that the South is perfect. And this really matters in the 12-team playoff because more teams are going to get in and there's going to be a hodgepodge, Bill. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's going to be, the committee's going to have to sort through some stuff. And I do think it's happening. So when you have Vanderbilt beating Alabama and you have Kentucky beating Ole Miss and you have Arkansas absolutely, come on. 3 minutes left. Arkansas has the ball almost at midfield. They're down by 1 against Tennessee. If Tennessee also loses today, all that it means is all these things that have always happened to the North. You're not perfect, so we're penalizing you. Mm-hmm. Let's apply it to everybody because it's fair to apply it to everybody. And that really matters. And we have to get that in the mind of the committee and not allow the South to make excuses. And that's why this day is huge. Because when the king is gone, the infallibility is also gone. And the infallibility of Saban Bama spread. It permeated the SEC in a way that really wasn't real. And then Georgia picked up that torch and they were very good. But they also played some really close games in that period. I think eyes are being opened, Bill. Do you think they are?
I think they are. I think the mystique is gone. Right.
Yes.
I really do feel that's the case. And maybe that feels hyperbolic because we're in the first weekend of October. But like I kind of felt it coming off of last year, right? You have an all Northern national championship game that Michigan wins. And you come into this season and it did, like we talked about this last week, it did feel like people were trying to pull some of that back, right? But I didn't feel it coming into the year. I'm glad the season has played out this way because I really do think we need a playoff committee that's going to keep an open mind of just like the quality of ball across the country. And again, it's like it's not that it's bad in the South. It's that there is good up in the North too. I think that's more to the point, right? And I just think sometimes it's hard for people to even want to look to like try to find it because they're just, I don't know, it was just easier to look down south and try and convince yourself that that's all you had to look to find good ball. And that's clearly not the case. Can I have a list of teams here that I want to read. Can I read them for you?
Let me say, can I say one thing first, real quick? Mm-hmm. I just want to say it real quick. Hog mentality. Hog mentality. Hog mentality. Hog mentality. Who said it in the chat? We got hog mentalities. Zach's saying it. Paulie Walnuts is saying it. No, John's saying it. Hog mentality. If you're in your home right now, stand up. Stand up with your Northern fans. I got a new chair, by the way. See my new chair?
Oh, that's fancy. Yeah,
a little more throne-esque.
You're getting closer to a throne. Not quite there yet.
I'm getting there. Yeah. Hog mentality, because it's chaos, right? Because it's chaos and because we're shattering narratives. Read your list.
So here's my list. And I'll just read your list. That includes 2 teams that are currently playing. Miami, Tennessee, currently playing. Texas, Liberty. Army, Navy, Pitt, BYU, Iowa State, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. List of unbeaten teams remaining in college football.
15.
No, fewer than that. Duke just lost and James Madison lost.
Duke just lost and James Madison just lost, so we're down to 13.
Mm-hmm.
We have 3 in the group of 5. Army, Navy, Liberty, as you said, we made the same list. We have 2 in the ACC, Miami and Pitt, but you think Miami's going to lose to Cal tonight, so stay up and watch that.
They're tied right now, yeah.
2 in the Big 12, Iowa State and BYU. 4 in the Big 10, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. 2 in the SEC, Texas and Tennessee might be about to lose. Mm-hmm. So let's also count up north. Army is north, Navy is north 2, Pitt is north 3, BYU 4, Iowa State 5, Indiana 6, Ohio State 7, Oregon 8, Penn State 9. Now, some people would make a big deal of the fact that there are 13 unbeaten teams right now, and 9 of them are in the north. Some people would make a big deal about that. Are we going to make a big deal about it on a 2-sword Saturday? Are we making a big deal that 9 of the 13 remaining unbeaten teams are from the north? Hell yeah, we're making a big deal because the South can cram it. The narrative is dead. Here's the thing. If you know a Southern college football fan, they might be on tilt right now. Push them over the edge. Don't let them up. They're down. This is not boxing where you give them a 10 count. It's UFC. They're down. Jump on their face until they tap out. The world has changed. We started this show with the idea that we might be living in a world where the SEC and the South win the national title almost every year. And we wanted to acknowledge the great teams in the North who don't win national titles. And the North rose up. And the North rose up. And Michigan rose up. And Washington rose up. And Oregon rose up. And Indiana rose up. And BYU rose up. And Iowa State rose up. And Pitt rose up. And Boston College rose up. And Syracuse rose up. And here we are. So let's acknowledge the facts. Don't live in the past. Everybody's the same right now. North and South, they're all good. Nobody's perfect. They're not infallible, and we're better than anybody down there realizes. And we don't want to sneak up on anybody anymore. Michigan and Washington snuck up on people into that national title game last year. Let's make them afraid in October. No more talking about 6 SEC teams in the playoffs. What if the playoff is 9-12 North, Landis? Let's talk about that.
I'd be down for that.
ACC North, 2 Big 12 North, 4 Big 10 teams. That's 7. Group of 5. And then you know what? Maybe like Notre Dame comes back around. All right. So like, let's make them afraid of that. So that's all, Bill. But I do think we're puncturing things. And I think this sticks. Like these outcomes for Bama to beat Georgia. And here's the thing, and here's the point that again matters. And I'm going to use one of our very good friends who I think is one of the smartest college football minds in the country to make the point, because he's not biased, because he's not silly, and he's really smart. And Arkansas just scored.
Tennessee let them score, I think.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a thing an SEC person would say. We let them score. So, I'm going to woo Pig Suey. I know people last week maybe didn't love when I was saying roll tide. It's because beating Georgia is higher on the pecking order than beating Bama. So woo Pig Suey. Tennessee losing is chaos. Shahan Jeharaja, one of the smartest college football writers around, earlier today, I'm not exactly sure when, and I'm not sure exactly what it's based on, but he said, I think there's 5 really good teams. And the 5 teams that he said he thinks are really good were Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. And then he said, I think everybody else is mid. So why would somebody say that? Because there's some ingrained things there. Because you're making assumptions based on last week. Because Tennessee beat an Oklahoma team that benched their quarterback. They blew out an overrated North Carolina State team. You think things. Why wasn't Oregon on that list? Well, Oregon maybe should have lost to Boise. By the way, Boise's great, but we dinged Oregon. Why isn't Penn State on that list? Because Penn State played a close game with Bowling Green. right? But we ding Penn State's not on that list because they played close with Bowling Green, but Georgia is on the list after losing to Bama and playing close with Kentucky. Why? Because that's the way we've always done it. And when smart people like that, and I would have this conversation with Shahan right now, it's like, why? Like, it's almost off the cuff, but Bill, it's very natural to people to say things like that. And that's part of it too. And Ohio State often is the only Northern team lumped in with that. But you and I on this show have penalized Penn State and Oregon for the things that have not been perfect this year. Meanwhile, I don't know if they're doing that down there. But at least nationally, they thought, hey, there's 5 great teams and 4 in the South, and Bama just lost to Vanderbilt today, and Tennessee might be about to lose to Arkansas. That's what we thought 8 hours ago, that Bama and Tennessee were 2 of the great teams. Why? Based on the past, Bill. It's based on the past. It's not based on the present.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really good distinction about what we try to do too, because we have acknowledged the flaws, even like in Ohio State a little bit too, as Ohio State's won every game it's played comfortably. Maybe I'm not listening to the right stuff or watching the right stuff or reading the right people, but I don't sense a whole lot of that when it comes to the and I get to the Alabama Georgia game was super exciting and like entertainment value. Yes, like it checked a lot of boxes, but there was also like in the afterglow, like a couple of days removed from it, there was like no acknowledgement of the flaws in both of those teams that allowed that game to be as entertaining as it was.
Yeah,
there's no acknowledgement of the flaw in Tennessee, which is like it's got an okay passing offense. So it's weird. Yeah, I mean, well, it's not weird. It's expected, right? It's expected.
Yes.
But I think, I don't know. We should be broken through that now based off what's happened today. Well, I guess we'll see if we are.
I think we are breaking through. The ice is cracking, brother. Now, they're not used to the ice down there. So when the ice is cracking, they're going to stay on the ice. And then now we're going to be in a Phil Collins situation, right? I mean, everybody our age knows the Phil Collins thing, right? You know the Phil Collins thing, right?
I don't think
you
so.
don't? See, like everybody of my generation knows the Phil Collins thing. But I don't know where the cutoff is. All right, I'll give you 30 seconds on the Phil Collins thing, right?
Okay.
In the Air Tonight, right? You know that song?
Yes.
If you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand. The rumor when I was a kid was that Phil Collins, like whatever, something happened with somebody he knew. They were skating on the ice and somebody fell through the ice. And then like the guy didn't help him. And Phil Collins like wrote that song and brought the guy to a show and played the song and put a spotlight on him. Right. That's Kirby Smart. The ice is cracking, brother. And if you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand.
I wish you had a drum set in your room so you could just hit the drum fill. Don't do it with your sword.
All right. So we'll get back to if Tennessee loses to Arkansas. Bill, we made a show and we changed the world. The world changed around us, but we're so happy.
Yeah. We just have a good time
here. Happy. I hope we've created a family. What a thing it is to create a family when something terrible happens to a Southern football team. You know where you want to come. I'm seriously going to start to cry. I'm so happy. All right, let's talk about some other great Northern wins. 18 minutes celebrating Southern misery is a good way to start. I think this Washington win over Michigan is like a legit win for Washington. And so in the offseason, when Washington was picked in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten in our KOTN preseason poll, we got pushback from Washington fans. Washington, frankly, has been better.
Yes.
And I think those fans were right. And they probably have a decent chance to be undefeated. And I think the Washington team that beat Michigan tonight, and we'll talk about the Michigan side of it too, is quite a good football team that just kind of got in their own way and had some bad luck, including some missed field goals against Rutgers. They missed some field goals tonight, but then they figured it out.
Yeah.
And the bad play call against Washington State, they're not that far from it. And like, to me, again, here's the conversation. I think Washington's as good as Missouri and Ole Miss. Like, tell me what grain of information you would take to say they're not, but we don't think of it that way. And results do matter. Results do matter. And I'm not trying to put Washington in the playoff conversation. I'm just saying, let's not pretend the North doesn't have some good teams too, who also aren't perfect, but are good, just like Missouri and Ole Miss are far from perfect, but are pretty good. I thought that was a good win for Washington.
I thought it was a really good win. That was a win. Washington's been such a weird team, which we talked about during the week. Like its statistical profile is not one of a team that was 3-2 coming into this game. But it didn't put all of that behind it. Like, as you mentioned, part of the issue with Washington has been special teams, and it did miss its first 2 field goals. One missed, one was blocked. But then it hit some big ones down the stretch. It only had 2 penalties in this game, which it was among the most penalized teams in the country. Washington only had 2, 5 for 6 in the red zone, which was like the third thing. It was penalties, special teams, red zone. And while not perfect, it was all better. I think we're all pluses for Washington in this game. So like when that happens, Washington, I think you're right, does have a pretty good football team. There are some pieces left over from the team that went to the national championship game last year that I think are pretty interesting and make the team pretty good. And then they've done a nice job of finding some people to supplement that team so that it wouldn't bottom out. And like I give a lot of credit to that staff, to the players, I think first and foremost, to make sure that didn't happen, because I think we all expected it, right? It certainly would have been explainable if that were the case. And that's not really been the case. They've played good football. They've not played winning football, and that's why they have 2 losses, right? But it's been a pretty solid football team this year, and I thought that was a really good win, like on both sides of the ball. I thought, for all those things that are true about Washington, I thought this game would be shining a little bit of a light on, like, okay, they're not as bad as we thought they were, but when a team like Michigan comes, I don't know that Washington has the physicality to win that game. And turns out they did. I thought Washington looked pretty good on both lines of scrimmage. So this could be a little bit of a springboard, I think, for them if they can finally play the cleanest game it has played all year, at least.
Yeah.
And kind of carry that forward. I think Washington can be a little dangerous.
And again, like we're not trying to make a Washington playoff case. We're just talking about good football teams and what's a good win and what's an acceptable loss and all these kind of things. I am going to give you my tears before we get to the end of this show. I'm going to give you my tears of joy if Arkansas hangs on. Tennessee is like driving here, but I'm going to give you my TIER. Michigan. For Michigan to be on a 3rd starting quarterback, Jack Tuttle replaces Alex Orji in this one. Tuttle had been hurt. I mean, he was. Part of me thinks if you are a coaching staff and you are on your 3rd quarterback 6 weeks in, you maybe don't know your team very well. But I know there were an injury situation with Tuttle too. It feels like that. I mean, did they maybe find a little bit with him, but also kind of like what took so long? I can understand how it would be very frustrating for Michigan fans, and not that Tuttle's necessarily the answer, but like, how are they here?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, because I think the same thing. Like how has it played out this way, right? Like how are we on October 5th and Michigan's on its 3rd quarterback and still like very much searching for the right answer there. I guess I would say that I thought there were stretches of this game where Michigan's offense probably looked the most functional it has looked this season. It wasn't perfect. Jack Tuttle turned the ball over there late, pretty crucial time for Michigan. So it's not all great all of a sudden, but I think maybe for the first time, I feel like Michigan might have something to build upon at the quarterback position. But we're also talking about a guy who's been like a journeyman backup his entire career, right? I don't think Jack Tuttle is going to turn Michigan's offense into a top 25 offense in the country. But if the conversation through the first 5 or 6 weeks has been the only thing Michigan can do is run the ball, maybe Jack Tuttle unlocks a little something more for them now moving forward. But regardless, the path to get to this point has certainly been a little convoluted and not the best reflection of that staff's kind of pulse for the team.
I mean, it's everybody knows the deal with how they got here in the offseason, not getting a guy in the transfer portal. So there's that part of it. That did you misidentify the talent on your own roster that led you to not go into the portal? But also we know there's the whole program was in such upheaval. That was obviously part of it too. But then once you have the guys on your team, you also through like the spring and August can't figure out who your quarterback is. So, but again, like that's not a terrible loss. Like to go to Washington is, I think, a top 30 football team. And again, results matter, but line them up. And again, this is one of these things. I don't like the neutral field Vegas line kind of doing things. There's a show that does power ratings every week. And it's like, I don't care if the team lost or remember, what would the Vegas line be? And the Vegas lines are just made up stuff too. Like what, like the idea that would I stop myself in the middle of a sentence? Would I stop? just because the entire Southern college football infrastructure has crumbled on a single Saturday, it's over, Bill. The empire is dead. You know how like they always make the jokes about like men like to sit around and talk about the fall of the Roman Empire?
Yeah, which I never really quite understood because I don't think about the Roman Empire all that much. But I will think about the fall of this empire.
Southern guys are going to be sitting around in like 2 years thinking of that battle, the Saban years. It's like, oh man, remember when it was our time? It's like, yep, it's not anymore. It's not. Hog mentality. Hog mentality. Holy Commodore. I tweeted Holy Commodore today when Vanderbilt threw a 50-yard touchdown pass on 4th and 1. I'm not rooting against Tennessee players. I'm rooting against the Southern college football infrastructure. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm rooting for the Hogs. Look at the Hogs. Look at those beautiful Hogs. Brett Bielema used to coach there.
He did.
Our numbers just went up. I'm so glad. I'm so happy that this is happening and that there's a place where people can come. It's dead. The South is dead. Long live college football. Our friend Stephen Godfrey is part of a college football narrative podcast. Who killed college football? I swear to God, Landis, who killed Southern college football? You got some time in the offseason? Can we do this? It's real. It's dead. Southern college football is dead. It's just college football now. There's nothing they do that's better than what we do. If they want to live in the past, let them live in the past. Well, actually, don't. Make them live in the present, and don't let them up. Don't let them up. Stay on them. Here are my tiers. I think there's a tier of 2 teams at the top in college football right now. Would you potentially agree with that idea?
Yes. Sorry, I had to think for a second of who. Yeah, I would. Yes.
Who would you think they would be?
Texas and Ohio State.
I think that's a tier of 2. I think, and listen, if you want to say Ohio State hasn't played anybody yet, like I understand that. Iowa is a pretty darn good win. Iowa is a pretty functional team in a lot of ways. And again, this is what we do in the North, or have done to us. When 2 good teams play each other and one wins by a lot, our instinct is to say, that team's not that good. Iowa's going to win 9 games. Iowa has one of the 10 best defenses in the country. Caleb Johnson is still great. The reason Caleb Johnson didn't go crazy today is because of Ohio State. It's not like Iowa showed up and forgot how to play football. Iowa has 2 losses to 2 of the 13 undefeated teams remaining. So let's not do this, because they wouldn't do this in the South. Let's not immediately turn a convincing Ohio State win that was not convincing at halftime into an indictment of Iowa. That's not how they roll down there. So let's not roll that way up here too. I think it's a tier of 2, and we'll get to more Ohio State, Iowa. So if we're going to have a tier of 2 teams at the top, the next tier then I think is big. But I think absolutely, if you're going to put Bama and Georgia and Tennessee right there, then you have to put Oregon and Penn State there. I think you have to put undefeated Iowa State there. I think you have to put Kansas State there. I think you have to put BYU there. If you want to put Miami there, that's fine. But I will not listen to any argument that has Tennessee and Bama and Georgia, who now have all lost, 2 of them, the not very good teams, any higher than these other northern teams that aren't Ohio State. Is that a factual football statement?
I think so. I think that tier 2 is, like you said, pretty expansive. Like it's like 10 teams or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you probably put Clemson in there too, right? Clemson beat Florida State today.
That's fine. Sure.
Yeah.
But
it's more to the point about like Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee, right? Like I think you kind of lump them all together.
But so we can't pretend that they're ahead of Oregon and Penn State, especially. We can't pretend that.
I don't think they are.
And we're not talking enough about Kansas State and Iowa State.
Mm-hmm.
Like people's view of the Big 12 right now is like, oh, the Big 12's a mess. It's like, and I think when you automatically, you know what's a freaking mess? The SEC is a mess right now. If the SEC was the Big 12, people would be like, oh, I have no idea who's going to win it. There's only one undefeated team. I can't believe it. But that's not what they're going to do. So let's do it for them. My good buddy Cullen on Twitter. So we were talking about section. He also sent to me that he thinks, I want to say it the right way. It's late night, Landis, so I'm comfortable saying this. This is for young ears. You might want to turn this off. But I liked how he phrased this. He said, I should have had this ready more, but I'm just sweating with joy. He said that I know you like section, but when a highly ranked SEC team messes around with a lower ranked team, I prefer sexual. And then he was like, oh, like this is getting sexual. And then he said that, I hope he's okay with me saying this because I just thought it was funny. And he said, Bama now has an STD, a sexually transmitted defeat.
I think
that was super funny.
You don't have to do it on the fly because I wouldn't make you do that. But by next show, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. I would like for you to rework the lyrics of Sexual Healing by Marvin Gaye into SEC Sexual Healing and have a song for us.
I am super happy to do that. So this is what we have to be aware of, because again, our instinct right now, and I know the instinct nationally, I know the instinct in the South is not to put Kansas State and Iowa State in with Tennessee, but there's zero reason not to do that. So if we're operating under, and here's the thing, again, here's what's going to matter. And then like we get to tier 3, like these, and the thing we have to acknowledge is we just don't know a lot of it now. We don't know.
Yep.
So to pretend that you know, and the South, while all grasping onto the past, also likes to pretend that it knows things that actually aren't true. So if you say, oh, I know Georgia's better than Kansas State, like, why are you saying that? And the answer can't just be recruiting rankings, because we're past that, Bill. And that's just not like us grasping for things. That's NIL, that's portal. And I do think the more that the talent spreads out, development matters more. And I think the coaching in the North is pretty good. And I think the development in the North is pretty good. Maybe because it's had to be, because the South clearly has had a talent edge. We know that. But this is not the past. And so I would like everyone to adopt our tiers. So I would like them to cry their tears and then adopt our tiers. If we can make
like for them to bathe in the tears of the South and then adopt our tiers of college football. Yeah.
But so let's just be on alert. And we're going to continually call it out. But if you're trying, it's Texas and Ohio State. It's Texas and Ohio State right now. And then we'll see. And like, if you think Oregon should be there, okay, but I'd put Oregon next more than I'd put any other Southern team. So, okay. Michigan has some stuff to figure out, but also they've lost to some very good teams. And maybe you think Tuttle maybe is a solution for the second half of the year, at least compared to what the quarterback situation has been in the first half. You think maybe?
I would stop short of calling it a solution. I would call it their best chance to find one, I think, over the rest of the year. Because he can do the quarterback run stuff too. It was very interesting to me that we've been waiting for them to do like quarterback run game with Alex Orji, and they kind of weren't doing it. And now they did it with Jack Tuttle. So I think that combined with his ability to clearly throw the ball better than Alex Orji, and at least for now better than Davis Warren was throwing it, I think that's the path forward. And then we'll see where it gets. So Michigan was also playing without Miles Hinton still in this game. Dominic Giudice, the guy who was like rotating at center, didn't play in this game. So this was not a complete Michigan offense. It was close to complete, but not quite complete. I do think one thing from this game, though, that is a little damning is probably too strong of a word, but probably has Michigan fans feeling a little worse about it, is like these were the two teams that played in the national championship. Obviously, both teams were gutted, players and coaching staff. And Washington, I think, came out in a much better spot.
That's a great point. And you would say, like, talent-wise, show me Will Johnson on Washington. Washington's Will Johnson transferred to Oregon. It's about what Washington added, right? And like they were able to add some players that Jedd Fisch brought with him from Arizona. I understand that. That's a built-in advantage that Michigan didn't have by promoting an in-house candidate. But Washington had roster deficiencies and tried to address them. Yes,
and Michigan didn't.
And it really is, again, a started discussion. And again, I'm not the person to second guess this, because I thought Sharon Moore was the right hire. It leads you to like, well, I mean, Michigan certainly could have hired a Jedd Fisch type. And I'm not saying long term that for sure Jedd Fisch is a better head coach than Sharon Moore. I don't know. But as you see sort of competence in a game like that, figuring stuff out, They could have had a guy like that, but they chose to stay in-house. And now maybe Washington didn't have that choice because the whole house left. I guess they could have hired Ryan Grubb if they really wanted to, and that would have been a similar thing. And because Ryan Grubb kind of stuck around, right? Then he went to Alabama to be the offensive coordinator, but then he got hired by the Seahawks to be the offensive coordinator, so he's not at Alabama. But if Washington would have wanted Ryan Grubb to be the head coach, he would have taken it. But they didn't go that way. They went with an established head coach. So that's a really good point about two really similar teams and who looked like the more complete, competent team tonight. And also they're like, right? I mean,
Washington's played better than Michigan all year.
Yeah. Damon Williams and Denzel Boston and
Washington didn't have to play
Jonah
Texas,
Coleman in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a really good point. That's worth monitoring. But again, you know, Michigan can go polish their national championship trophy and figure out how to get better and just maybe come back for next year and figure it out. If you're coming in late and when the audience has grown, we just would like to reemphasize the fact that there are 12 of 134 FBS teams remaining who are undefeated. 12. And maybe we would point out the fact that 9 of those 12 are in the North. The Southern undefeated teams are Miami, who still has a chance to lose tonight, Texas, and Liberty.
Sorry, I forgot. I forgot the cross Tennessee off my list of one.
Yeah. Oh, wait, just take a minute. So and again, if you just are getting here, what we're doing is taking a moment for Bill to cross Tennessee off the list of undefeateds. Bill, would you like to make sure? How's that line? Is it a good solid line, like a big X?
I'll do it again, just because I can still see a little bit of it. So I'm gonna cross it.
Okay. Oh, they're gone now. There goes Tennessee. Ooh, they're gone. The undefeated Northern teams, Army and Navy, and we're going to have somebody from Army or Navy on soon because, I mean, who doesn't celebrate that? And they do belong to all of America, but geography is geography and latitude is latitude, so they're ours. Also, Pitt, BYU, Iowa State, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. Those are the Northern undefeated teams. Let's talk about Minnesota USC. Not to brag, and I can't brag because on our Bets of the North, our $500 bet went up in absolute flames today. But my 3 other best bets all were Northern underdogs that I took with the points, but I also said, if you want to take them to win, go ahead and take them to win. And they all won outright. Syracuse won in overtime against UNLV. West Virginia won at Oklahoma State. I hope we never have to talk about Oklahoma State again. I am sick of it. They blow.
They stink. Yeah, they're awful.
They absolutely stink. I said previously, inside the heart of Oklahoma State beats the heart of a mediocre SEC team. I apologize. It is a bottom tier SEC team beating in Mike Gundy's heart right now. And then Minnesota, as an 8 or 8.5 point underdog at home, got a huge win against USC. And Bill, I've liked the conversations we've had this year about winning plays. I kind of thought it was their turn for something to go right for Minnesota. But it's not magic. They were down 17-10 entering the fourth quarter. They intercepted USC, scored a touchdown, forced a punt, scored a touchdown, got an interception to end the game. So again, from 17-10 down for Minnesota, interception, touchdown, force a punt, touchdown, interception. That is absolute winning plays that included them going for the game-winning touchdown in the final minute on 4th and an inch from the goal line and deciding to go for it instead of kick the field goal. And they were ruled initially that they didn't get the touchdown on a Max Brosmer sneak, and then they went back and looked at it and ruled it was a touchdown. It was. But winning plays for Minnesota, like, it is not a hopeless situation there. It's been very intriguing and often frustrating to watch Minnesota work this out, but they did. And it included, like, Darius Taylor fumbled right at the end of the first half to set up an easy USC field goal that hurt. Like, they still kind of shot themselves in the foot, but they overcame it. This is a legitimately gigantic win for Minnesota, and they have really worked for it.
They have. It really feels like Minnesota is starting to figure out what it wants to be offensively. Yes. It finally got Darius Taylor going on the ground this week, but it had been doing things with Darius Taylor in previous weeks, which I really like, because sometimes I feel like Oklahoma State, I think, is a really good example, right? Like, we all thought Ollie Gordon was the best running back in the country. We come into this season, Oklahoma State can't run the ball, and it's just like, well, I guess our best player can't help us win anymore. And Minnesota was was going through a similar thing with Darius Taylor, and it just started throwing on the ball. And it's like, we'll find other ways to make sure that our best player touches the ball in ways that try to impact winning. So I credit Minnesota's offensive staff for figuring that out. And then finally the guy goes off in the way that we thought he was capable of doing this year. It was an incredible win, I thought, for Minnesota. And those last 2 touchdown drives weren't cheapies either. It was 6 plays, 65 yards, and 12 plays, 75 yards. They weren't put on short fields. Max Brosmer had to make some plays. Darius Taylor had to make some plays, and they did. So this is a team, I think, similar to Washington, but for different reasons, probably feels like its record should be much better than it is right now. And it's just come up short, came up short against USC. Probably it got a really bad call against Michigan, had an opportunity to win that game, but it didn't let it totally snowball. And then it got to this point against what I think is still a pretty good USC team. And put together a really nice win for PJ Fleck and his program.
Darius Taylor, 25 carries, 144, 5 catches, 56. That's 30 touches for 200 yards. Your best player helped you win. And I really, again, I just respect it because what Minnesota is doing is they're trying to transition to a more of a passing offense. They feel like they need to do that. They brought in a 6th-year transfer, Max Brosmer, who started 1 million games at New Hampshire, to help them do that. And if they can establish this with offensive coordinator Greg Harbaugh and what they have there, they have Drake Lindsay as a young quarterback behind them. And if you let Max Brosmer come in and figure it out and kind of take the lumps and show Drake Lindsay the way. And now Drake Lindsay can maybe hit the ground running a little bit when he takes over the starting quarterback next year. And it's also not a lost season for this year because you just beat USC. It has been an absolute grind for Minnesota, but they're trying to get somewhere, man. And I appreciate the try. And tonight it worked. So it's been very frustrating at times. I would love to get PJ Fleck on the show, but a lot of credit for not giving up on it. And I also want to say on behalf of the North to USC, we're good. You were supposed to come in and sort of save the Big Ten, and you're not, at least this year, because you've come to the Midwest twice and left with losses, and you still, I think, have to go to Wisconsin. Is that right? So it's all good, man. Tell Bambi it's okay. We got it. We're good.
We have a good stat in the chat from Benjamin. Big Ten teams in conference play traveling 2+ time zones, 1 in 7.
1 in 7,
which is worth having in your mind as we approach next week when Ohio State travels to Oregon and Penn State travels to USC.
Very legitimate. And it's how did Washington lose to Rutgers and beat Michigan? It's that, at least partly. And we knew that. Didn't we?
Can I give you an update as we're talking? Cal just scored. It's 21-10.
Who's winning that game?
The Bears.
So you made a cram it parlay this week. Is your cram it parlay going to hit?
No, because South Carolina blew it. I think I was right on all the. Well, we'll see how this game ends, but I was right on all the other legs.
I'm so happy. Everybody and Cal's not part of us, and frankly, I'm a little over whatever this is. It's fine. It's just not for me. I'm too old. So I'm glad Cal is having a great time doing it, but I'm more happy that Miami's going to lose.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Really. Not kidding. It's not my $100 bet. My $100. My $2 bet on Pitt at 100-1 to win the ACC has been in for 3 weeks. If they come out of tonight as the only undefeated ACC team after a really nice win at North Carolina, I would just tell you, maybe check the numbers tomorrow and see where it is. I'm sure it's down to 20-1, but are we sure that Pitt's not the best team in the ACC?
No,
we're not
anymore. I was a little hesitant to brace that idea, even as of earlier this week, but I'm coming around on it.
Are we sure? So, and now we're here, and this is the other thing. Let's all watch for this together. And let's hold people to account. Let's watch the buildup for Ohio State, Oregon compared to Alabama, Georgia. Let's watch the way that pundits talk about the teams going into the game. Let's watch how the game is played next Saturday night, how many mistakes are made, how many great plays are made, but also mistakes. And by the way, we are officially at a point, by the way, Landis, where if Alabama didn't have a 17-year-old receiver, I don't know, would they be 2-3 Like mighty Alabama is being saved by a teenager regularly.
Thank God Ryan Williams decided to leave high school early. Yeah.
And I suppose we can celebrate that and talk about like, oh, Alabama's so talented, whatever. You're being saved by a guy who should be going to homecoming. You would be dead. You're already dead. Alabama's dead. Long live Alabama. Like, you're dead. You're not who you were. And you may, I don't want to say never be again, but again, to everybody and I can't wait. And it's hard because Kalen DeBoer is the son of the North, but he doesn't belong down there. And I'm so sick of all the Kalen DeBoer. Like, we just pretend that Kalen DeBoer is Nick Saban. It's such a freaking insult to your own guy. He's the greatest coach of all time. This guy's just as good, if not better. You're drunk. You're drunk on SEC juice. And all that's going to get you is an STD, man. So it's a lie. The past is the past. The present is here. Let's watch how Oregon, Ohio State is treated and how it's played, Bill, because this is the North's version of that. And I don't think Oregon, Ohio State should take a back seat to Georgia, Alabama in any way. In a talent discussion, in a national championship qualification discussion, and how good they are discussion, and how great. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a game that one team stinks in the first half and the other team blows in the second half. I guess that makes for good football when it's sectioned. Hey, it's a really good football game if both teams play a horrible half. That's what we all want. Maybe Ohio State and Oregon will just both be good the whole game. How would that be? Georgia and Alabama.
People won't know how to wrap their minds around it. Yeah.
No. Maybe they'll probably punish both of them. But aren't you curious to see the comparison?
Really curious. Yes. Because the one team playing a great half and then playing a crappy half led to everyone crowning those two teams as the best teams in the sport.
Yes.
So if that happens, yeah, I would like to hear Ohio State and Oregon treated the same way.
Yeah. So we don't have to do a ton on Ohio State, Oregon right now because we're going to do a whole Wednesday episode around Ohio State and Oregon and our big game breakdown there. We're going to move it to Wednesday so we can do big game breakdown on a couple other games on Thursday, including, I think, Kansas State, Colorado, USC, Penn State. Like, we have some other really good Northern games this week that we want to give attention to. So we'll do like a whole Wednesday show on this game. But it has officially become, I think, a defensive battle. The way that the Oregon defense is playing up front, Jordan Birch getting after the quarterback, Derek Harmon and some of the defensive tackles, like really causing havoc. Good coverage on the back end, Jabbar Muhammad and those guys. Like, I think, and Dylan Gabriel having a couple hiccups with a couple goofy interceptions. They still move the ball at will against Michigan State, but they had some bad turnovers. So the score wasn't as much. And then it took Ohio State a while to get going. It's only 7-0 at halftime against Iowa today. But again, we talked a lot about how explosive Caleb Johnson was, and Ohio State shut that down, Bill. This was a defensive win for the Buckeyes, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Caleb Johnson, I think, had 44 yards on 12 carries. I think before the fourth quarter when Ohio State put some backups in and then he finally got loose. He had one long run against Ohio State's starting defense. Yes. Otherwise was totally bottled up and then scored late when it was 35-0. He scored a touchdown run that made his numbers look a little bit better. Ohio State's defense did the one thing it had to do in this game, which was completely shut down that Iowa rushing attack. I thought it was a pretty impressive performance from Ohio State's defense, especially because we were probably questioning. I think questioning is right. Just how sound the linebacker play has been and would be in a game like this for Ohio State. I thought it was pretty good. Cody Simon missed a tackle on the one long run that Caleb Johnson got against Ohio State's starting defense. Aside from that, I'm not sure that Ohio State's linebackers missed a tackle or if anybody on Ohio State missed a tackle. It was just a pretty clean game from Ohio State's defense up until the point where Ryan Day pulled the starters out of the game with like 8 minutes left.
And it stood out because it was the one.
Yeah. And
he got a 28-yard run off of it. And then Jermaine Matthews missed a tackle as a second teamer on him on the touchdown run. And it stood out like Ohio State was physical in the holes. Even guys who weren't making tackles were clogging stuff up and filling holes. I was a bit dismissive of the Ohio State defensive tackles coming into the game because they're just going to run wide. They're going to open holes on the edge. Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton, I thought, played great. I thought they absolutely, Tyleik Williams, who had, been out previously, like he absolutely stuffed Caleb Johnson on a couple plays, but really, like I thought Sonny Styles came a long way in terms of being physical and covering some tight ends, covering some guys in the flat, like recognizing what was happening. And I did get a message from an Ohio State fan during the game that made me actually exceedingly happy. And it was someone who said, after a 7-0 lead on Iowa in the first half, in the past, he thinks he would have been frustrated and upset about that. And he was trying to just enjoy the game and not get mad. And we want fans, we want Northern fans, Southern fans can cram it. We want Northern fans to enjoy their teams. And I also think this is another part of it that happens sometimes too. I think sometimes in the North, because of the way the national media speaks of Southern teams, we can think the South is perfect. So then when your team is not playing a perfect game, even if they're winning, you can be frustrated with your team. So if that's all that comes of this, that Arkansas beating Tennessee and Vanderbilt beating Alabama and Kentucky beating Ole Miss and almost beating Georgia, if all that does is make you less angry at your Northern team when they're not perfect, that's almost enough for me. Because they screw up too. Mm-hmm. So don't let the perception of their greatness, the narrative of Southern superiority, make you harder on your very good Northern team. And I absolutely think that has happened in previous years. And there has been more reason for it in previous years. Because when you were looking at Nick Saban and thinking, man, we got to beat that guy if we want to get where we want to go, that could feel very daunting. But he's gone, and the myth is dead. So for Ohio State fans, I thought that first half, right? You get Ohio State gets stopped on a 4th and 1, you turn it over, right? You can't have those things. But to shut down Iowa and hold Iowa scoreless in the first half, I thought Ohio State for a while, like there was a little bit of frustration of Ohio State allowing Iowa to convert some 3rd down throws. Ohio State shut out Iowa with their first team defense. I don't know, like, again, the pursuit of perfection. I thought, okay, Ohio State wants to shut down the run game and make sure they don't get beat over the top in the pass game. And so if Cade McNamara is going to complete a couple 3rd down throws, credit to him. I thought Iowa did throw the ball better than I anticipated, but also never in a super dangerous way. Yeah. So I hope Ohio State fans were able to enjoy what I think was a very good win over an Iowa team that I think is going to win 9 games and be one of the 25 best teams in the country. So do not take that win for granted, Ohio State fans.
I thought it was a great win. I don't like maybe one of the better like non-marquee game, like regular season wins that Ryan Day has had in his tenure. And yes, like Iowa's offense is one dimensional. If you shut down that one dimension, then you're probably going to have a pretty easy time keeping Iowa off the scoreboard. And Ohio State did that. I think part of the passing success was partly born out of you just don't want to play pressed up with your defensive backs all the time because you want to give them the opportunity to get involved stopping Caleb Johnson if he does get to the second level.
Yep.
So that's probably part of it. But then we saw there was a point in the game where they did press him up, they did blitz, and it was like Cade McNamara didn't know what he was doing. So it's there when Ohio State has to do it. I think that it is playing a little conservative with its coverage. And so that was good for Ohio State's defense. And I actually thought in an odd way, it was a little reassuring that Ohio State never struggled to move the ball against Iowa. Mm-hmm. It fumbled on a drive where like maybe Jeremiah Smith was going to score a touchdown on a screenplay. It got stopped on that, like one of the very few run plays Ohio State had all day that like wasn't blocked up all that well on a 4th down stop from Will Howard. And then Will Howard threw a bad interception, but then made up for it by throwing 4 touchdown passes. So I think that's a very good Iowa defense. And
I do too.
That was the first time, they said it during the broadcast, the first time Iowa had given up 400 yards since the 2021 Big Ten championship. If you go back and look through the game logs of Iowa, like teams do not run the ball as well as Ohio State ran the ball in Iowa today. So and this is a team in Ohio State that in the past when it has gotten into games where throwing the ball can be a little clunky or a bit of a struggle, it didn't have that run game to turn to carry it. And it did today against, again, a very good defense. So yes, clean up the mistakes. Yes, you don't want to leave points out on the field, and Ohio State has done that a little bit this year. You don't want to do it next week against Oregon, but it's a very dangerous team. They can beat in a lot of different ways, and that's like my biggest takeaway in Ohio State right now.
And we had anticipated and saw the arrival of the Will Howard run game, which is going to be a factor, and more called runs for him against Iowa. It was not a big part of the offense in the first month, but that's here, and that's another piece that could be very valuable against Oregon, against Penn State, against Michigan in the playoff, right?
Yeah, and help them finish drives too. I thought that I was telling it at one point, but I think he ended up with probably 8 or 9 designed runs in this game, which is probably double what he had all year coming into it. And we knew it was going to be part of the offense, just a matter of probably holding a little bit of it back because you didn't have to do it. I think more and more it has come out. He scored a rushing touchdown last week against Michigan State. I think that's now 3 straight games with a rushing touchdown for Will Howard. So it's going to continue to be a part of the offense. And again, it's just like it's another answer that Ohio State has, especially when it gets into games against good teams like Oregon, like Penn State.
Yep.
Like Michigan's defense, at least, it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket to help you work your way out of some stuff.
And I do think Iowa, to hang in with that Ohio State offense and be 7-0 at halftime, it's like, oh, Ohio State did move the ball, but what happened? Well, Jay Higgins, one of the best linebackers in the country, punched the ball out from Jeremiah Smith and forced a fumble. Well, what's that? It's your best player making a play. Well, Sebastian Castro made a really nice pick. Right and we had talked about like Sebastian Castro got beat by Iowa State late in that game. Like that's one of your best defensive backs making a play on the ball. And they were talking about that during the game. The idea of, so Iowa wants to make sure they don't give up big plays and hope that you make a mistake offensively before they make a mistake defensively. And I had them 7-0 at halftime. And then we saw the Ohio State offense in the second half and away you go. But that's not what's going to happen to Iowa most of the time. They are not usually going to face an offense that eventually it's like, well, eventually Emeka Egbuka is going to come around, or eventually they're going to hit you with the 2-headed monsters. And by the way, the freshman's there doing crazy stuff, Jeremiah Smith. So I thought there was a lot to take away from Iowa. They couldn't run it the way they wanted to with Caleb Johnson, right? And so I expected them to be able to pop some stuff against the first team defense at least once or twice, and they never really did. They did not blow open the runs where he's untouched. And then Ohio State didn't miss tackles, as we already noted. So that I think was maybe the more concerning thing for Iowa. But I thought defensively, they moved the ball, but there are not a lot of offenses like Ohio State's offenses. So I don't think Iowa should be going back to the drawing board. Like they know who they are. And that wasn't good enough in the second half, but it was good enough to hang around in the first.
There were some questions for Kirk Ferentz postgame about quarterback change or whether or not they want to keep riding with Cade McNamara moving forward. I guess there were from the Iowa side of it, there were 2 things that if I'm an Iowa fan, I'm a little bummed out. And that is one, like Tim Lester saying during the off, like, oh, we've got some more stuff we want to do offensively. And I just don't think we saw any of it. Right? I don't think we saw any
like it
coming off of a week off. And then I thought we might see Brendan Sullivan in this game. And Iowa didn't do that either. They put him in at the end of the game, and and it was against Ohio State's backup defense, granted, but like he got loose and ran the ball. I was like, oh, maybe you could have tried that in the first quarter. But so I do feel like Iowa is still very much searching for ideas offensively beyond hopefully Caleb Johnson can break 3 tackles. But I don't think it's a reason to write off Iowa from being what we expected it to be this year.
Yeah. And Oregon against Michigan State on Friday night, very similar. Moving the ball almost at will, not cashing in as much as they could have because of some turnovers, eventually pulling away. Michigan State having a lot of trouble moving the ball at all with Aiden Childs and that young offense. So we will talk about that a lot. We're gonna dive in deeper than any national show you'll find on Ohio State, Oregon, because it belongs to us. And if you want to watch some Southern show and have a bunch of Southern guys or national guys who love the SEC talk about Ohio State, Oregon, I guess that's your prerogative. But we're going to be doing it too. And we think the South can cram it. So maybe you want to do it with us on Wednesday. We'll talk more on Monday about a lot of other really good wins. Pitt is legit. Not perfect again. Bad pick by Eli Holstein, a pick 6. But that, like, Des Reed is awesome, Bill. And Eli Holstein was making throws threw for 350 or whatever. Like that offense is still, they were getting a little nuts at the end of the game, right? And making you a little bit nuts, but that's a good win at North Carolina, isn't it?
I thought so. They weren't making me a little nuts at the end of the game. I did want to see Pitt like just run out the clock, like grown man drive. You're not getting the ball back. We're going to run out the clock, and they didn't quite pull that off, but they still kicked the field goal to put it out of reach. Yeah. So no, I thought that was a good win for Pitt that had like its method of winning prior to this point had been kind of hoping to hang around so that Eli Holstein can do some crazy stuff in the fourth quarter, and this game was not that. They were in the lead and they salted it away, and they got a win. Like UNC is not great, but it was on the road. It was first ACC game. I thought it was a pretty nice win for Pitt, and I also think that Des Reed to me feels like a very serious contender for ACC Player of the Year with how he's played so far.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. He has been awesome. The transfer from Western Carolina, playing great at running back. Iowa State did a little bit of what you have been waiting for, like didn't just beat somebody 20-0, 43-21 over Baylor. So that's a little bit of what Landis had been asking for. And I think West Virginia might be back. And I really think West Virginia like might have found itself after two really difficult losses. Absolutely took it to Oklahoma State. 389 rushing yards on 65 attempts for West Virginia. They threw it 16 times. 65 run, 16 pass. They bludgeoned Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State ran for 36 yards. West Virginia ran for 389. I think West Virginia, like that, we have an Iowa State at West Virginia game coming up. Like West Virginia still has a chance to make an impact in this Big 12 race. And again, for fans who were very frustrated early in the year, the Penn State loss is a non-conference loss. The Pitt loss is a non-conference loss. They are frustrating. But if West Virginia wins the Big 12, they're going to the playoff. And so if we're going to talk about that it's wide open, if they're going to play like that, they're in the mix, aren't they?
I think so. That's what West Virginia needs to be. I think it was a team that came into the season probably wanting to be a little more offensively than it was last year, show a little more balance, show that Garrett Green had grown as a passer. And I think we're just back to the point of, nope, we're going to have our teams. We're going to do what we did last year and hope that gets us to the wins we need to win the Big 12. So that was good to see. 389 is crazy. I know Oklahoma State's not very good, but 389 really against anybody is pretty impressive.
Yeah. So I will say there's almost nothing I respect more than trying something new. But one of the few things I do respect more is trying something new, failing at it, and reverting to what worked. So if West Virginia did that, so be it. So the only two Northern losses this week that weren't to a Northern team, Boston College, tough loss against Virginia. Like they kind of just ran out of juice. They were driving late in the game. They had won their last two games on late fourth quarter drives against Michigan State and Western Kentucky, and they ran out of magic. They were doing it again on third down against Virginia, and I thought Thomas Castellanos, who made some really good throws in the first half, was going to do it again, and he rolled to his left, and I thought was about to rip like a third down conversion throw, and he just did one of those where he threw it, and the ball wasn't in his hand anymore, and Virginia picked it up and got a scoop and score, and then it was over. Then he threw another pick, and like it just got away from him. So Boston College lost, and then Kansas lost to Arizona State because Kansas is not very good this year. Other than that, Oregon over Michigan State, Washington over Michigan, Ohio State over Iowa, Indiana over Northwestern, Wisconsin over Purdue, and Nebraska over Rutgers. Everybody else in the North who lost to another Northern team. So Q's big win, Pitt, Iowa State, Penn State, Minnesota, a good week for the North. We did have 8 teams off this week of our 28 Northern teams. And so as we wrap up, I'll just say this. On Monday, we cover everything. Well, the way we do this show is Monday, we cover everybody in the North, what happened, what we thought of it, what did we learn, what does it mean? Thursday, picks and previews on every Northern game, our 28 teams. And then in the middle of the week, we try to do some cool stuff that we think is interesting, maybe have some interviews with some Northern coach and players, some Northern reporters, bring them in, work them in. There are people here tonight who have never been here before. If you like it, give us a thumb, subscribe, try us again during the week. We also tell the South to cram it during the week. So we are fighting this fight with you and for you. And I don't know if anybody else is doing it. But who's actually fighting the fight are the Northern teams playing really good football. And from Ohio State to Oregon, from Indiana to Boston College, from Iowa State to Pitt, there are a lot of teams doing it. And we want to celebrate it and contextualize it and call out when it's good, call out when it could be better, and call out when people aren't giving the North enough credit, and call out when people are saying stuff about the South that is not true anymore. So thanks for being here, whether you're new or you're old. Tell a friend. Bill, we just think college football needs this viewpoint.
Yes. No one's really ever tried to do this, I don't think, right? And we are just the beneficiaries, I think, of good timing.
We really are.
But, I'm glad that it's happening nonetheless. Yeah, we want to try to get this viewpoint more out into the world.
Yeah. So we do it live Monday through Thursday at noon on YouTube. You can also find us anywhere that you get podcasts. We drop everything there. We have a betting show on Friday morning, and we would be so excited for anyone who's trying us to try us again, and anybody who's been here to keep sticking around, because without you, we're just two guys sweating and shouting into a microphone. But we still would have swords, right? And even if nobody was here, Bill, Bama and Tennessee still would have lost today. Even if we were talking to no one, you know what still would have happened? Bama still would have lost to Vanderbilt. What would have happened? Can you imagine what would have happened if Oregon had lost to Purdue today, or Ohio State had lost to Northwestern, or if Penn State, who actually played UCLA, had lost to UCLA? What would people be saying? But that's not happening.
I don't know. It didn't happen. Yeah.
It didn't happen. What actually happened is Tennessee and Bama both crammed it. We didn't even have to cram it on them. They crammed it on themselves. All right. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for putting all this stuff together, making us look good and sound good. We're having a good time, and North football is having a good season. So thanks to you guys for being part of it. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was KOTN Late Night on Kings of the North.